Guillermo del Toro wanted to make a Star Wars movie, and it's not happening. There's a lot to talk about with that story and more. So welcome, everybody. This is the Resistance Broadcast. I'm John. That's James. Lacey is very close to having a baby, so she is still doing a partial schedule, but you can see her on TRB Live, of course, and she'll be back to full-time eventually. But me and James here holding down the fort, talking Star Wars. We are going to be talking Star Wars news for the first time in a while, James.
Yeah, because Ahsoka took over and we took a hold on the news. There's probably other news stories we could go back and be like, did you catch this? This kind of got passed over, but we just wanted to pick up from where we're at, right?
Yeah, and there wasn't a ton of news over the summer. It would have been like, did you check out the new Lego set or, stuff like that. But there was an interesting thing, just to warm things up and get back into the idea of talking about Star Wars news that I thought would be interesting to talk about, James, and that was, and I'm sure you saw this or heard this, but
I actually did not, and I'm looking at it now, and I'm like, did you add this later to the show notes? Because I didn't even see this.
I popped it. Yeah, I popped it in. I probably forgot to mention it to you. I just assumed you had heard of this, but it's not anything that you got a deep dive on. Basically, the gist of this is Matthew Vaughn, filmmaker, known for the Kingsman movies and other things. Josh Horowitz, Happy Sad Confused, asked him if he would ever want to do Star Wars, and he's like,
it's going to be a theme tonight. He
said, I would, but only if they were interested in rebooting, because he believes that Star Wars is only the true Star Wars is only the story about the Skywalkers, the family. So he said if they ever wanted to reboot it and retell the story with Luke and Han and Leia and all that stuff, he's like, I would love to do that and take risks with that. But so I found that to be very interesting. And I know people have been talking about it for a long time. Will Star Wars ever reboot? Because James Bond does, because comic books do, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what your take is on this, James, but I just don't think that will ever happen. And I think the logistical reason behind that is twofold. One, look at how certain fans reacted to just sequels with these legacy characters with the actual original actors back. And it still was vilified and divisive and split. If on the second point of it, if you're going to tell me they're going to completely try to retell George Lucas's story, that thing is going to get skewered. No matter how good it is, it's very rare for things that are rebooted that are even as close, let alone as good as the originals. George Lucas not being involved at all, I think it would be a bit blasphemous for them to even attempt to do anything like that. So to me, it's not even on the blip of any sort of radar that they would reboot and retell and remake the Star Wars movies. I have a weird feeling, knowing that how long I've known you, that you disagree and you think that they will reboot Star Wars eventually. But what'd you think of Matthew Vaughn's his way of saying he would do Star Wars if they were able to redo everything?
No, you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong in the sense that you had me pegged, because I'm with you. I don't know that. I think that certain movies do sort of fall into that like untouchable thing. And I think Star Wars is one of them for the reasons that you laid out. I also think it's very close-minded I'd love to have him as a director, but I'm like, look, if you want to say something like you want to go like Halloween or whatever, like, would you ever do a Halloween movie? Only if I could reboot it. And I could really do my own, because I only feel like the story is this big. I don't want to make another movie that, and with all these complex or Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't want to do involved in all the other sequels and Saw movie. You know what I mean? Like,
and those all
with Star Wars.
Yeah.
What?
And those all have been rebooted.
I know those all have been rebooted, but I could understand a director saying, like, I would only do a Saw movie if I could reboot it. I don't want to get involved in all the it has to be continuous stuff. But with Star Wars, it's like if you've got a good story, you just take place within that galaxy. And it doesn't have to be that connected. And I just think it's a little bit closed-minded. It also felt to me a little bit like he's got to be smarter than that. I wonder if this is a way of him saying, like when you ask your parents, like, can I go to that party? And they go, yeah, of course you can go, but you have to take your dad with you. And you're like, no, I can't take my dad I can't take you parents to the party. That's social suicide. It's like, you're giving me the option, but you're not actually giving me the option. It seems to me like he's saying, I would absolutely do a Star Wars movie only if they let me reboot the original. It's like, then the ball's in their court, Lucasfilm. It's like, that's not a fair thing. The ball's not in their court.
Yeah, that sounds to me that Matthew Vaughn isn't really interested.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's sort of saying like, yeah, I'd do it if pigs fly.
Yeah.
It's this thing that he's presenting is just like not a real option at all. And it's, to me, like, I don't know, maybe he's got a really cool idea for it, but he's got to know that idea is not going to be well received. He's better off to go the Zack Snyder route and do something that's like, I had this idea, but it didn't work with Star Wars, so I changed that idea into something else. Create a new hero that's not called Luke Skywalker, but has a Luke Skywalker story.
Right. And I understand where people are coming from when they make the comparisons of things that have been rebooted. But Star Wars is just different, man. Star Wars is bigger. There's no James Bond celebration. Star Wars is a cultural phenomenon beyond things like James Bond. And James Bond was rebooted, so to speak, where they just recasted with the same continuity because they kept the other actors in. So it was more of a recast than a reboot for a while. They rebooted with Daniel Craig. I understand that. And that was only like 10 years after Sean Connery did it. We're talking about 50 years later, they're going to just start rebooting Star Wars. Plus, superheroes can easily be rebooted because that's the genesis of comic books. They always reset. They killed Superman in 1993, and then we're like, just kidding, he's back. And they restarted Superman. There have been many different Spider-Man issue 1s where they tell this new story. That happens a lot in comics, so that makes sense to do that in comic book movies. Star Wars is it's going to be hard to like absorb this, but Star Wars is real. It's meant to be something that we think is real. And that's why they don't recast a lot of those actors. They try to keep the suspension of disbelief that this is all connected and everything. There's so much more to it. And then, of course, the final nail in the coffin on that is you're not remaking George Lucas's movies, especially with him not involved. Like, it has disaster written completely all over it. And in my opinion, it will never happen.
There's one other aspect to this that I'd like to also talk about too, is the fact that Star Wars currently is capable of creating content still.
Yeah.
So like if you're looking at like, okay, Back to the Future, great movie, probably should never be rebooted, but could it be? Well, then you're looking at a studio who's sitting on the rights of Back to the Future and they're going, what is Back to the Future doing for us right now? Nothing. It lives in its legacy. We've got these 3 great movies. They've been around forever, but we're not creating new Back to the Future content now. Let's take advantage of that. Let's do it. And you could see how something like a franchise, that property, that name, that title, all that would be reused, repurposed, rebooted, right? But like with Star Wars, there's stuff coming out. It's doing something for them right now. And we'll continue to do something with it. In fact, like I can't imagine a scenario where Lucasfilm has 2 projects on themselves, something that continues the story or a complete reboot, and they choose the reboot over something that's continues the story. Like it isn't, you're not saying why not? Like, sure, if they want to make a movie about a rebooted Star Wars, I'd go see it. I probably would go see it if they made that movie. But the thing is like Lucasfilm only has so much money, and them making that movie in lieu of other movies would be a weird decision, I think.
Yeah, of course. And it would also be just putting a target right in their back saying, like, you literally are out of
And then there's
ideas
the fans and
that you need to start all over.
And that brings me back to my original point is I was like, come on, like you say there's only one Star Wars story. Look around at all the other Star Wars stories
Also,
or take a second to dive into the lore.
What?
There's plenty of stories you could tell in that world. They've already expanded on it.
And look what happened to Jake Lloyd. Look what happened to Hayden Christensen. Just playing a younger version of an existing character. What talent manager, what parents, what actor at 18, 19 years old is going to want to be the new version of Luke Skywalker redoing Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker? To me, it's like that's like career suicide. Everything about it just stinks. I just don't think
I don't even think fan films do that. I don't even know if there's like a fan film where someone's like, I'm going to retell this story.
Y'all retelling? No,
casting my own thing
of the characters. But yeah. To me, it's weird. And to me, I think we both
like, I'm going to do Star Wars, but it's kind of going to be like Star Wars meets Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to spend this budget and do it. And it's going to be cool. It's like, I don't even think indie filmmakers would want to risk the budget on that.
No,
they'd just be like, what is this?
And I think this is Matthew Vaughn just not being serious, that he doesn't want to do, like, is not really interested in doing Star Wars.
The closest thing to this, honestly, might be Visions.
Maybe. Yeah.
There's some things there that are kind of like, we're taking the idea of it, kind of retelling it.
But yeah, so just an interesting little story, and I know it's something that always comes up with fans, and our take, I guess, is just that it's just never going to happen for all the reasons that we listed. But James, let's hop in.
Opening statement.
Yeah, yep. Opening segment, opening news. We got to warm things up in varying ways here, but let's hop into our first segment, James.
All right.
I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it.
This is Will of the Force. Here we pitch questions and also choose some of our Resistance officers on Patreon and do our best to decide what will happen in the future. Since we are discussing some news on today's episode, we're only taking 2 Will of the Force questions. So we decided to pick both of them from Resistance officers on Patreon, and the first of which coming from Fulcrum 77, aka Diana. We know Diana.
Hi, Diana.
They sent us the question: will there be an Ezra Bridger show? I'm going to go first on this one. I'm going to say no, there won't be. Although I feel like on past episodes I've said yes. I think that if there was something in this vein, it would be a bigger. It would more likely follow a Sabine path than an Ezra path. But maybe, I mean, I'm interested to see what you're going to say, John, because I do have a feeling you might say yes on this, considering what we've talked about the future of Ezra would be. I think that could be interesting if they did do it. But right now, I think it's one of those things where, like, you had Rebels, you told a great story, you left it on a cliffhanger. This is now a new way to sort of wrap up those stories instead of using it as a new jumping pad for more stories. Like, Mandalorian was great. We brought in Ahsoka. Does that work? Could we spin her off to another show? Now we're bringing in Ezra. Does that work? Can we spin him off to his other show? I think it's already the spin-off. And I think this story right now is probably what they're utilizing to end and wrap up those stories, especially when it comes to the Thrawn Dave Filoni movie, all that. I think that's the direction it's heading. It's not a jumping pad for more content. What say you?
I do not think there will be an Ezra Bridger live action show.
Bridger grade.
I am not. Huh?
I was just because you fumbled over the words. Ezra Bridger.
Yes, for some reason,
just-
saying Ezra Bridger sometimes is tough for me. I don't know why.
Yeah,
But-
Sally Seashells.
Yeah. So I do not think there will be an Ezra show in live action. I'm not completely ruling out a return to animation for Ezra in his own show after these live action events. I think that's very possible. I think Taylor Gray has always been in good graces. I think he's excellent at what he does. It really depends on who would take over, because I don't think Filoni's going back to animation in the full capacity he was. So I think there's going to be more Ezra. I hope there is. I don't like the idea of him just being sort of a... I want Ezra to have an impact on the story. So far, he has not had an impact in Ahsoka. So I hope he still is an impact player, because I don't want the end of Ezra's story being this sort of flicker in the wind when his end on Rebels was so heroic. So I don't want it to be this sort of victory lap. I want there to be relevance to it. So I don't know what's going to happen. I do think he's going to continue on. I agree. He's going to be in that movie that Filoni's doing. Is it more than one movie? Depends on the success of that movie. So there's a lot of things that have to happen. But the short answer, Diana, I'm not sure what you think. Love to hear what your thoughts are. But I do not think there will be a live action Ezra show.
So I'll say this. I thought you were going to go with the yes, because the Ezra Jason Syndulla thing.
That's a good point. But
and I think if you said bringing him back to animation, that would be a great show. It actually reminds me of a pitch that I haven't talked about in a long time. And actually, now that I'm sort of remembering it, I'm like, where is this show? I want the Mark Hamill, the like Luke, that we get sort of in The Mandalorian, that one, but I want it voiced by Mark Hamill in animation, and it's him and Kylo, and you can recast young Kylo as a young voice actor, and you still get, you don't have to have Adam Driver,
Right.
you can have a young person, but you get Mark Hamill to lead the show, take Luke in places that could be really cool and interesting in animation.
on a ton of voice acting, so...
Yeah, no, I know. Obviously, it would be his wheelhouse. The Star Wars fans would like it. He can't be Luke Skywalker on camera, but he can be Luke Skywalker in animation
From his house.
Yeah, we get that story leading into the sequel trilogy. I think that's a great show. I don't know why it hasn't happened yet, but if that doesn't happen, the alternative of that, still sort of in this Clone Wars veins of like Master and Apprentice, an Ezra Jason Syndulla show. If they don't go the live action route with it, that'd be a great animated series, and see what kind of
and maybe
they get into, and let the door be open, because they don't show up in the sequel trilogy. Like, let the door be open for them going off to other galaxies or whatever.
Yeah, and it's possible we get an older Ezra in the Rey movie. We don't know the fate of Ezra Bridger, so
that's fair too. Yeah.
I had another point on this.
Jason Rey's age?
It's gotta be close.
He'd probably be a little older. He'd definitely be about or closer than Han Solo was to Leia. That's 10 years older.
Oh, at least, yeah. I forget what my other point about it was regarding Ezra, but either way, I don't think we're getting the Ezra show. Oh, this was my point. I think also it doesn't. I think they're getting too heavy with this show is this person's show thing. Like Andor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Lando, Ahsoka, and it all started with Solo, the movie.
Right.
It's like, why can't it just be Star Wars blank, 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 blank subtitle and have Ezra in it, have this person in it, have this... Like, we don't have to do all of these main protagonist that's their show thing. I get doing
we
it
almost got Rangers of the New Republic.
Like Andor probably didn't have to be called Andor.
No, I did. I thought it should have been. I pitched the idea. Obviously, a million other people did too, but it could have been Fulcrum. It could have been like leading up to this point.
Or Rebels. Oh, damn.
Yeah, I looked it up. Actually, Rey was born 15 ABY, so Jason would be 15 years older than her. So that's probably too much for like a romantic relationship. But it could be could be
Oh,
someone.
what am I even saying? You're right. Yeah, because she's not born until like a year after the events of Ahsoka or something.
Yeah.
He's already 10 or 11. Yeah. All right. So that answers that one.
That answers that one. So let's get another question in here from one of our newest commanders, Joshua Brown. Joshua asked us some questions on our Patreon live Q&A, and that was lots of fun. But Josh is here again asking, will we learn in Ahsoka season 2, hopefully, cross fingers, that Thrawn is actually responsible for the return of Palpatine? John, you get to go first on this one. Any chances that you think they're going to try to connect Thrawn to that like sort of looming, how did the sequel trilogy even happen with Palpatine's return?
No.
Okay.
I think that diminishes the power of Palpatine. Having another villain who I see as a lower tier villain than Palpatine, because you do the tiers of villains in Star Wars in terms of actual villainy, not like popularity in real life. Palpatine's top tier. He's top of the mountain, and then you have Vader, and then you go down the list and stuff like that. But if they retcon this, and I don't like using that term, but this sort of would be that, and have Thrawn now be responsible for how he comes back to life and stuff. I think that's a mistake for a bunch of reasons. I don't want to get too deep in the woods on it because it's will of the Force. We can expand on this maybe in a discussion, but I really think it'd be a mistake. I think it would devalue Palpatine and how he is as a planner, how he is as a schemer, and also again that whole idea that this is something he's been chasing since the beginning from his master Plagueis, to just throw a military admiral in there being the one who figures it out versus this wizardry mystical madman. I don't like any of that, so I don't think they're going to do that, and I think that'd be a really big mistake if they did that.
I took this question a little bit differently than you did, but I will say ultimately I answered it the same way. I think what was being asked here is not like, is Thrawn, like Palpatine's dead, plan over, plan failed, but Thrawn figures out a new way to bring him back and is ultimately responsible for the return. I took it more of like, is Thrawn, are they going to explain that Thrawn is like one of the cogs in the machine that Palpatine built as sort of like another one of those redundancies that is, hey, if I die, you got to do X and Y and Z, and Thrawn is living out what Palpatine's orders were in order to make it that Palpatine stayed alive or was able to come back from death in those circumstances. I still say the answer is no, though. I'm interested to see how Filoni handles Thrawn, considering he's sort of reinvented him a little bit, and Timothy Zahn too, from the Thrawn that was the original novels, who also took place in this same era. Thrawn of the original novels, was, if I'm not mistaken, because I didn't read them, but he was here to do something. He was with the Empire for different reasons. And my understanding is this new Thrawn is only here to work with the Empire in order to assess their abilities to as an ally or an enemy of the Chiss. And now that Palpatine is gone, I'm not sure what Thrawn's motives are. Of course, we may get that in Ahsoka season 2. He may come back and be like, okay, where are we at? Where are we at? Oh, Palpatine's dead? Ooh, things have changed. My plans have changed. Maybe at that point, then he wants to be the leader and he wants to own that whole thing and take that back and use it again as an ally. Which would then fly in the face of all of this, of like be responsible or a cog in the machine of bringing Palpatine back. It may not even be in his motive at all. He may have only ever worked for this guy because he was the head leader. And now that the head leader's gone, he goes, I'll take over. I'll do this. I'll be heir to the Empire. I will take all of these assets and use them for the Chiss's benefits. We may find that out after he gets back from, Nowheresville. But regardless, the answer to the question, in my opinion, is that in Ahsoka Season 2, I don't think the story of Thrawn will involve or be connected to the eventual return of Palpatine.
If there's an Ahsoka Season 2. Also.
Again, cross your fingers that there's Ahsoka Season 2. I think there will be. I'm kind of a little bit surprised they haven't announced it yet, but
there's a lot of things going on. So, the strikes and finances and all that stuff. But
all right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the news section for this week in Resistance Report.
It's the Resistance.
We haven't heard that in probably 2 months.
That's funny, man. That's absolutely right. Yeah, it's been a little bit. And it's funny too, because it's one of the segments that has been around forever, what I mean?
It's a quick one tonight.
Yeah, it is. We really only are going to be talking about one story, and that is the fact that there was sort of this breakout story, and it's sort of been in development as it moved along. But the gist of it is that at one point, Guillermo del Toro was working on a Jabba the Hutt story for Star Wars, working alongside screenwriter David S. Goyer. Now, I said this all sort of came out of development. David S. Goyer was on Happy, Sad, Confused, which was funny. We talked about that earlier. Always breaking new news, Josh Horowitz. But the interesting thing was that he said he was working on stuff behind the scenes and stuff for Lucasfilm, and it involved Guillermo del Toro, and I'm not really going to say much about it. And then when that came out, Guillermo del Toro said, it sort of had to do with a character that had 2 B's and all this. And then it just, I don't know, it's kind of funny how it all kind of came to be. But the point of the story being that they finally got around to just telling everybody, we were working on a movie together. It was about Jabba the Hutt. It was about the rise and fall of the character. And it just is one of those scripts that they, or those projects that they were working on and they were developing. And then when they found out they didn't get it, not only was it just treated for them as something that they sort of said, when that happens, we say that was good practice, everybody. We were developing this thing and it didn't happen, but we'll be ready for the next one. But there was some honest truth to this. He says, but I don't know why it got away. And that bothered him. And he was like, it was just one of those weird ones that go, sometimes things slip through your fingers. This isn't quoting him. I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes things slip through your fingers, and it's fine because that's just how the business works. But it's unfortunate when a Star Wars movie does, and you sit back and you look at your career and you go, why did that not happen? So we thought we would take some time today. I'm going to go ahead and just start with your thoughts on this, but we wanted to talk about this process as it comes to Lucasfilm and how we've sort of uncovered through this and that of how they've been running their business and how many projects have worked, and then how many projects have not worked.
This blew my mind, man. I don't understand. This story would make more sense if it was Lucasfilm was trying to get Guillermo del Toro and he was showing interest and then he backed out. I'd be like, oh, okay. All right. Well, they tried to land a big fish there. But you're talking about a guy who, he's an Oscar winner. He won Best Picture and Best Director for a live action movie. And then he won a Best Animated Feature this year at the Oscars. This is a top shelf guy. So when I hear that they didn't go forward with it and he's like confused as to why, and then you have David Goyer, who's a very just veteran screenwriter who's done so many movies I like, I'm like, this sounds like the perfect project. And you also then, I think about the animatics and the creatures that you see in these Guillermo del Toro movies, and like thinking about how he would deliver a Jabba the Hutt movie 40 years after the awesomeness of Return of the Jedi.
That's what I was thinking. I said like when you look at the original trilogy, the only comparison here for him as a creature person might be like the cantina. But how do you write a story about all the creatures and stuff in the cantina? The probably the second most notable creatures thing in the original trilogy. You do? I think because Star Wars is the, well, whatever. But yeah, you think it's the first. I think it's maybe second. Is that the Jabba and Jabba's palace? I mean,
that's when they were in their groove, man. Like, you hope they were trying to buy Halloween masks.
Number one
together.
Yeah,
this is just, it makes me scratch my head. And then that quote that you said from Goyer, which was, Josh was essentially asking him, like, why didn't it work out? And Goyer said there was a lot of behind the scenes, going on at Lucasfilm at the time. So in other words, he was saying like they were having issues, and
he says, but it's a cool script.
Yeah, which it still exists. It's still out there somewhere, but it just makes me scratch my head. I'm like, so you have a 2-time Oscar-winning filmmaker who wants to make this story about a popular character that he'll do a good job on. You don't want to go forward with that. But for the return of your new generation Luke Skywalker, you're bringing in someone who's never directed a feature film. How does any of that make sense?
When you know talent, John, you can just see it.
Huh?
Like, I'm just trying to come up with this, like, sometimes you can just see talent like waiting to blossom. Look, but it's like, these other people they're shining talent in your face. You're blinded by talent. You're not picking up on it.
If you're developing this reputation of stumbling to make these movies, and even these movies, which I love all of them, the end product, but they've all hit roadblocks, all of them, except The Last Jedi. Don't you think you want a sure thing? Like, I need to know more about this. I hope this gets uncovered a bit more to understand why this didn't go forward. Get credit to both of these classy guys, Del Toro and Goyer, for not spilling the tea really as to why they didn't go forward. They probably could have done that, but they respect the industry. They respect Kathleen Kennedy. They respect the business, I'm sure, all of that. And they probably still want to have good relationships. But I just can't wrap my head around it. So then I'm trying not to think about the Jabba the Hutt, like, Del Toro movie in my mind and how awesome it could be, because it's just going to upset me, because I know it would be so good. The guy is like one of the top, like, artistically acclaimed, critically acclaimed, successful filmmakers right now. And he wanted to do it, and he had a good writer with him. I'm so confused as to why this didn't go forward. And the only thing we have to go by is Goyer saying there was a lot going on behind the scenes at Lucasfilm at the time. What time was it? Was it during Solo time? Like, was it supposed to be a sort of Solo follow-up? Because they were going to see Jabba at the end of Solo. Yeah. I need to know more about this.
There was the other Boba Fett movie.
The Josh Trank thing.
Probably all connected.
I need to know more about why this didn't come to fruition, because it doesn't. All I can say, James, is it doesn't make sense. I don't even think I was talking about the Josh Trank thing. What was it? Not also,
oh man, I'm blanking on his name.
Mangold?
Who's doing the other Star Wars movie? Mangold? Yeah.
I think that was a rumor. I don't think he was actually involved with that.
No, I think he was. He said he was. Am I wrong on that? I thought.
Well, either way,
it was rumored that he was when it first came out, and he was like, no. But then, like later, it was like more uncovered. He's like, yeah, I was involved. We had like a whole thing, and it just didn't end up coming to be. And then we worked on something else. That was my understanding of it. But
But
John,
back to this. I mean,
go ahead.
It just doesn't make sense. I need to know for my sanity as a fan, how does this not move forward? I don't understand it.
Yeah, John, I just Googled this really quick. Remember, it was like he was talking about how it was like they didn't want to do it because it was too gory. It was like an R-rated one.
Oh, maybe.
You remember this? Yeah. Okay, look. This is what I do best. If you want to give Lucasfilm the benefit of the doubt, sort of thing, we don't know what this script is. It could be a great script, but it's just not in the vision. They're like, Guillermo, David, we want to work with you, but you gotta follow what we're doing here, because it's the same thing we just discussed about Matthew Vaughn. Matthew Vaughn comes in and says, I want to do a Star Wars movie, but I want to reboot it. And they're like, no. Like, we'd love to have you, but no, we can't do that. And then he goes to the press and he says, I tried to do a Star Wars movie, but it was great. I had a great script, but it didn't end up happening. I don't know. I guess Lucasfilm just wants to pass. And everybody's going, why? That's insane to me. And it's like, I could almost see in a private conversation, Kathleen, I mean, look, I'm totally giving them the benefit of the doubt here, and I don't even think this is the case, right? But I'm saying I could understand a scenario where she goes, you didn't read it, or you didn't know the full effect of what they wanted to do, or they wanted too much money, and it was just like, you're crazy. Guillermo del Toro actually is pretty notorious for that. There's a reason there's not more Pacific Rim and there's not more Hellboy, is because he asks for too much money for the movies that he wants to make. Some people give it to him. But at some point, the studios just go, you're crazy. We're not giving you that money. We don't think your stories are going to have that much return. So it's possible that he came in and said, I want $300,000 to do this Star Wars movie. And they go, no, we'd love to have you. I always do that. I do it. 300 million.
I'm saving you from getting hit in the comments, buddy.
Yeah. But I mean, I always try to find there being two sides of a story when we're not in the room. When you hear one side of a story come from, I was working with this studio and they were crazy and it didn't end up happening. I know they have a long history of bad stuff happening, and I am on this show too, constantly saying like, what is going on, right? But when it comes to a story like this, I think I believe their side. I'm on that side. But for a moment here, I want to say that at least with this story, there's not enough here to say that they couldn't have asked for something ridiculous, something that breaks their canon, or they're like, here's what we want to do. We want to do what Joker is doing for the DC world. And they go, I mean, that's great. Like, Joker's a great movie. And, it won awards and everything. We'd be crazy not to say yes to that. But that's not what we're doing. We don't want to do what Joker's doing. We want to build in our own universe. And Guillermo says, then I'm not doing the movie, I just, there's not enough here, and I want to provide that side of the story instead of completely bashing Lucasfilm. But that being said, I'm with you. I do think it's crazy that they can't like bend or break or do something to make something like this happen, because he's the guy. And why does this still continue to happen over and over and over again with all these great producers? You had Zack Snyder who said, I want to do a movie, and they said it doesn't fit with our world. And he goes, fine, I'll go have Netflix pay for it.
Yeah. I don't
Is
really.
it Netflix? Am I crazy on that?
Netflix did his Pinocchio movie.
No. I was talking about Zack Snyder. It's not Netflix.
Snyder is Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not sitting here saying like Del Toro is this box office world beater or anything, but
right.
Star Wars has shown to us through Andor and stuff that they do want to bring in it's like prestige, and that's where you get like your Tony Gilroy and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think a lot of what Del Toro does in his own original movies is, a lot of unique stuff that maybe isn't wide net, but the talent is the talent. And if you bring him into this universe with these resources, with his talent, and a script from David Goyer, who has a lot of good scripts
and likes that one,
it's just very tough for me to swallow. And I understand, we got to give benefit of the doubt because we don't know what happened. I 100% agree. But I believe in patterns, and David Goyer saying there was a lot going on. Like, Lucasfilm has been like having problems getting movies off the ground, and that's no surprise. It's public knowledge. Other projects, there's so many projects that have just come and gone, and so I have to go by where there's smoke, there's fire. And if I'm looking at both parties here, and I'm not saying one's pointing the finger at the other, it's just they had this idea, Del Toro and Goyer. They were building out this world, they said. So it was beyond just a thought. They had a full script. They had a story. They knew where it was going. It seemed like it was molded clay, just ready to get put in the oven. And then on the other side, you have Lucasfilm, and we've seen all the drama and the firings and all the other stuff that goes with that. I got to put this on Lucasfilm until I hear more about it. And is it an assumption? Sure, but it's an assumption based on patterns of history, recent history.
Absolutely.
So it's just one of those stories. There's not much else we can really say to it, but it's a head scratcher. And I'm sure we're not alone in this thought. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, a lot of Star Wars fans are like, are you kidding me? Like, right now? Really?
Yeah.
So I need
especially cult fans of this director,
Yeah, exactly. I need to just, like, for our listeners right now, close your eyes. Think about the imagery in Pan's Labyrinth or The Shape of Water and what he does with creatures and even people and his effects and his storytelling. And then think of that in Jabba's palace and think of what he could do with today's technology, considering how amazing the creatures team and ILM and everybody did in 82 when they were producing 83's Return of the Jedi. It would be one of the most aesthetically satisfying things to see from a visual standpoint, let alone the story they could deliver with Goyer's chops. It's very frustrating, dude. It's so frustrating to hear this, no matter who's at fault.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with the creatures, because he's obviously famous for creatures and stuff, but he's also really good at creating environments, worlds, and making things dark, like cool dark, not just like dark for the sake of being dark, but like interestingly dark. And I think you're telling a story of the rise and fall of Jabba the Hutt. That means Jabba the Hutt is a younger Jabba the Hutt who maybe doesn't sit at the top yet, and he has to do the things that he has to do with this criminal gang or this dark world or whatever, and you know what I mean, and make his way to the top. That's cool because you're including all of Guillermo del Toro's best things: world building, dark, entity and storytelling, and creatures. It's like that to me is like, it's almost one of those things of like, who could possibly be better? Because you might be able to find a better gangster director, but they probably wouldn't be able to do creatures as well, or whatever. So it's like,
right.
He's like someone who kind of hits everything about Jabba the Hutt on multiple levels. So it's a tough L, to be honest.
And I know like if Lacey was here, she'd be talking about how Lucasfilm robbed her of the return of Puppet Jabba.
Yeah.
You know? But dude, what if this was supposed to be sort of a solo too?
Yeah, that was sort of gonna raise another question that I wanted to
not called
discuss
solo
on
2
here.
or anything, but a follow-up.
Right, yeah. Yeah. In your opinion, what do you think, like, what's the number? What are we talking about here of like Lucasfilm says right now, like if you were to say, okay, what are they working on? Well, they're probably working on Mandalorian season 4. They're probably working on Ahsoka season 2. There's probably some assumptions here.
That's
right?
everyone Filoni doing that.
I understand. But what I'm saying is, like, I'm talking about, and they're obviously working on the 3 movies. There's some production.
The Rey movie. Yep. How
many other things do you think that they've sat down with X director or X writer? I shouldn't say X. I should say Y, Y director or Y writer, right? And they've said, we like it. Go for it. Develop it. The pitch got at least some level of green lit, almost to a point where you start to see it in the Star Wars tabloid, circuit of like, oh, they're developing a Crimson Dawn movie, like at what point or at this point in time, like how many projects do you think they're working on that are going to get let go?
I don't know.
And we just don't ever hear about it.
Oh no, I'm sure there's things that come and go, but when it comes to like someone like Del Toro, though, like of his resume, like it just feels different. It feels different than them wanting to needle with a still pretty green Gareth Edwards Rogue One, or Lord Miller pre-winning the awards for Into the Spider-Verse. They were the 21 Jump Street guys. Show me the director of the caliber of Guillermo del Toro that they dismissed, because it's not Patty Jenkins. We know that, and it doesn't exist. Like,
yeah,
would he be the best director to have ever directed a Star Wars movie?
No, I mean, I think
most acclaimed.
No, Ron Howard. I mean, probably
Ron Howard. Sure, yeah, I guess. It'd be close though.
I don't know, man. J.J. Abrams too.
Yeah, but I mean, JJ, I agree. I love JJ. He's my guy.
But I mean, there's a couple reasons there. I mean, like, okay, JJ probably isn't as successful for these reasons, but JJ is successful for these reasons.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So
it's like I think there are a couple, but this is absolutely up there. It's in that category. This is your Christopher Nolan or something like that, saying like, I wanted to do Star Wars and it didn't work out, and it's like, dang, man, that stinks.
We've heard people tell us, even not that all that long ago, that longtime people and people who work or recently had worked at Lucasfilm or whatever, like usually take their shots at Disney about Disney's cheap or Disney this, Disney that. But Goyer said specifically there was a lot going on behind the scenes at Lucasfilm.
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't say Disney. So I don't know if that's a political thing, because there's a wider net to work with in Disney. He doesn't want to burn any Bob Iger's bridges, but there's something missing here that we're not getting, and I need to know. I can't wrap my head around this one.
It doesn't mean anything, because you know how Google searches are or whatever. But I put in, I was trying to come up with a search for it, and this isn't even the right thing. I said most relevant directors working today, right? Not even a great question, but it does bring up a list, and the list are all very notable. It's like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino at the top, Christopher Nolan, David Fincher, James Cameron, also, just one row below that. And then in that third row, Ridley Scott, Guillermo del Toro, and Wes Anderson. It's like he's freaking up there, man. Yeah. Going on just out of curiosity, like some of these other ones, I am imagining, like, what if they were wanting to do Star Wars and we couldn't get it? Spike Lee, Alfonso Cuarón, Paul Thomas Anderson, David Lynch, Tim Burton, Edgar Wright, Clint Eastwood, Greta Gerwig, Sofia Coppola. It's like all of these are huge names. And it's funny to look at just literally the list that I just told you. One of those people said, yeah, I tried.
Yeah,
I tried. It didn't happen. I couldn't make it happen. I wondered after the fact, why didn't it happen?
I know.
You know, it's nuts to look at that list and then be like, one of those people did actively try to do something that is probably the perfect fit for them, and it didn't happen. And part of that reason, according to David, is they had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, and Ron Howard, you're right. He is currently the only Star Wars director to have won Best Director at the Oscars. Del Toro would be the second one. But instead, we have newcomer Charmaine Obaid-Chinoy, who might make the greatest Star Wars movie ever made when we finally see it. I just can't. You could be the biggest apologist for Kathleen Kennedy or whatever. Answer me how that makes sense that Guillermo del Toro can't make his Star Wars movie, but they're going to give their next launching pad to someone who's literally never directed a feature film.
Well, it's kind of a little bit worse than that too, because remember, they announced 3 directors, their past, their present, and their future, and only one of them has directed a
Filoni
feature
hasn't
film.
either. Yeah,
Filoni hasn't either.
Right.
So they two
Filoni's
out
a little
of the
different,
3,
but yeah.
I understand. Yeah, 2 out of the 3 directors that they announced for the future of Star Wars have not directed.
Never directed a movie.
Yet.
Yeah,
never directed a movie.
Yeah, it's baffling. But hopefully we learn more about this. But I think we've exhausted the meat and potatoes that we at least have so far.
Out of that list that I gave you, who? I mean, are you a Nolan, Ridley Scott, Alfonso Cuarón?
No, not Ridley Scott.
Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino.
No, I don't like any of those guys. Cameron would be interesting. He would. I don't know if he would ever do it. He likes doing his own thing.
You know what would be fun would be a like a Kessel Run of directors. Be like, what are your choices? Because Christopher Nolan would be like, well, Cillian Murphy has to be in it, and I need Hans Zimmer on the music, and he'd be like, I don't know. Yeah, Eastwood would be probably pretty good. I think Cuarón would be similar to
Eastwood's
Del Toro.
Too old. Clint Eastwood's like 94.
I know, but I mean, like, he's still putting great stuff out.
By the time they got to him, he'd be 107.
that's
he's like 107 years old. You reach look as good. You do not.
I like Guy Ritchie's movies, but like
these guys are very niche that you're throwing.
I don't think
he
fits Star Wars. Yeah, Edgar Wright, same thing.
Yeah. And again, I would just make it clear, like, I'm not trying to take a shot at Obaid-Chinoy. It's just the fact that they're giving a movie for their biggest IP to somebody who's never made a movie. And then you hear Del Toro wants to make a movie and it didn't work out. Something doesn't make sense, and I need someone to either explain it to me or more information, the truth to come out as to why. That's all. Right.
Yeah.
It's
a little bit wild. Like I feel it's one of those sort of like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, are we just not going to acknowledge the fact that this person is like a no-name, never directed a movie person before?
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I want to like be supportive, and I am being supportive. I want this to be great. But when we're talking about other opportunities, like it just sort of digs its own hole. It's like, we're going to give it to this person. You're like, okay, I can swallow that. All right, it's there. But then along the way, we're like, we passed up on that person to give it to the other person. We passed up on this person to give it to the other person.
Yeah, it's
like why?
You're going to land these people on an asteroid, and you're not going to get real oil drillers to drill that asteroid.
I know.
Jeez. Written by JJ.
Shut up.
All right. Let's move on to our next segment, which also we haven't done in a while. Resistance transmissions. All right, folks, it is time for resistance transmissions. Now, I thought about doing this, James, for the first time, which is posting the topic to Threads, Blue Sky, and branching out to others. We haven't done that yet. So currently, we still only post it to X, formerly known as Twitter. We put out a situation. You respond to them. We prefer usually funny stuff, not too seriously, depending on the topic. But either way, it is always a good time. James, I did forget to send you the image to put on for the video version, but everyone knows what we're talking about here.
Sure.
At the end of Ahsoka, it is revealed that Baylan Skoll is standing atop the outstretched hand of a statue of the Mortis Father. Now, we posted the concept art, which shows the father from the side with his outstretched finger pointing out to the horizon in the distance. And so we simply asked, what is the Mortis Father statue pointing at? And we said it could be anything from Star Wars to real life pop culture, anything. So we got a bunch of answers, and we're going to go through them here and see if we can have some fun. So the first one here is from Adam Odell at Odell Adam, longtime listener of the podcast, Adam Odell. He said he's pointing at the visual effects line item on the show's budget and how they couldn't afford to have Zeb be a major character on the show. That's good, Adam. Next up, we have Sean Santarude at Rude Cold. What's up, Sean? He said he's not pointing at anything. He's just asking you to pull his finger.
Oh gosh.
Lowbrow humor. But I love it, Sean. Thank you. Next up, we have Lando's Lounge.
Father this.
Exactly. Hey, if Eopies do it, the father can do it. Next up, we have Lando's Lounge at Lando Lounge. What's up, Lando Lounge? And they said he's pointing the place all fan theories go to die. Like Marek is Ezra, I guess. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Next up, Rick Villanueva at Cad Bane's Bounty. What's going on, Rick? Hope all's well. He said he was about to press clear all on his browser history just as he turned to stone.
I literally knew it. I literally knew it when I saw the question. I was like, someone's going to say he's pointing it where the clear history button is or something.
I think it was...
I knew it was coming.
Genghis Dingus? Like one of the first Resistance transmissions, and that joke has like really just become part of our culture. We got to find that original clip somehow, or audio. All right, next up we have Cameron at cboyd_07, who said the Mortis Father statue is pointing at Taylor Swift at the Chiefs football game. Oh, Cameron.
Yeah. The father must be what the F in NFL stands for.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, man. Next up, we have Clara at Clara EPB. Thanks for writing in, Clara. Clara said the father is pointing at Leo's Rick Dalton, who's pointing back at the father, who's pointing at Rick Dalton, pointing at him.
Who's pointing at Spider-Man. Who's pointing at Spider-Man?
He's pointing at Spider-Man, yeah. Next up, we have Semperfi Danny. What's up, Danny? And she wrote, quote, "Go forth, Bilbo Baggins, to the ring of great power, which you find over there in the land of..." Turns to stone, and then the father turns to stone before revealing the location, leading to another 10-hour trilogy by Peter Jackson.
There you go.
Thank you, Danny.
That makes sense. Peter Jackson, another name.
Peter Jackson. Yes. That, another name that could enter the mix, but has not. Yeah. And last but not least, we have Joey Sack at Joey Sack. What's up, Joey? Way to get your handle, of course. And Joey said, he's pointing to Camino, which ought to be there, but it isn't. I love that. That's a good one.
Oh, you know what? It's funny. I misunderstood it. When I read it, I was thinking he was referring to like Bad Batch and how it's like not here. But yeah, no, totally. It's as simple as like, if it's not in the galactic maps, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's Obi-Wan saying it should be here.
Yeah.
And then that little wise guy kid is like, someone erased it from the archive memory.
So on in my world, it should be he's pointing at Kijimi, which should be here, or Alderaan, which should be here, but
and now isn't. Kijimi's at Clayton Sandel's house.
Exactly. Very cool.
By the way, if you haven't checked it out yet, check out our episode with Clayton from last Thursday or Friday if you're on audio podcast apps, where he really took us inside the closing of the former home of ILM. It was such a cool chat. So check that one out. But that takes us to the end of the show. So I want to thank everybody for listening, watching, being a part of TRB. This is the first time in a while we did 3 segments on an episode. So it was nice. But
It's pretty standard.
Yeah. And we'll get back into that once we get back into the post-Ahsoka fold in full. But thank you again, everybody. And a special thank you to, of course, our patrons at patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. James talked about at the top. You can submit topics to the Will of the Force and a lot of other stuff. We have a lot of exclusive podcast episodes over there. Every week we put out a mini episode, commentaries. We have a Discord server. If you're souring on some of the public social media apps, we have a great community on our Discord server with a lot of different channels. A lot of cool stuff. So go to patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. Check it out. Tiers start at just $5 and join the Resistance. And you're supporting us, of course, along the way. So thank you. Special thank you. Shout out to our generals and spice runners. General Carmelo, John Reese, Jetta Rosewater, Frank Grande, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count Pepto, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, Colin Cormier, Jolton Jedi DiMaggio, Diana, Dave Hornack, and our Spice Runners, David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and the Fort Worthian. And all of our patrons, thank you all so much. And everybody who listens, watches, however you take in TRB, thank you so much, whether that's Apple, Spotify, YouTube.
Yes.
Make sure you follow us and subscribe on those platforms because it's free to do. And if it has a rating system or review, please rate us 5 stars. That'd be cool. And share with a friend. If you have friends who like Star Wars, if you're just starting off a new semester at school or new job, whatever, bond over the pod. It's a great community, good time. And if you're new to us, hopefully you're enjoying it. And thank you. So that is it for us. Lacey Gilleran, at Lacey Gilleran on social media for Lacey. She'll be back with us on TRB Live Thursday. James, how about you?
You can find me on most social media at Myra Trunks.
And for me, the same, but at Johnny Hoey and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We did Halloween recently, and we're doing Manhunter next, the OG Hannibal Lecter movie with Brian Cox. All right, that's it for us. We will be back with you all on Thursday for TRB Live, where we're going to probably dive into some news and talk about a lot of other stuff as we always do here. So enjoy your weeks, and we'll see you next time right here on the Resistance Broadcast. See you around, kids.